Hello, welcome to this video tutorial talking about one of the viewer questions. So somebody just like you sent in a question and we're going to try to address it as best as we can. And actually I'm going to pull a little cop out this week because the question's a really good question. I'm not going to really address it directly, but I am going to address kind of the Arduino side of it. So a gentleman sent in basically a project he's working on. He's got 3 strain gauges and he's got them hooked up to the analog inputs of his Arduino, and he wants to get that analog input from the Arduino over to a program on his computer, like some type of computational program that can then kind of crunch those numbers for him. And his concern is sending information over the serial port. You know, he recognizes that you can only send information 1 byte at a time, and his concern is that there's going to be a lag. And so really what we're going to talk about is kind of sending multiple pieces of data over the serial port and how you might handle that on the computer side when you want to get all those pieces at the same time. So we kind of address it. I mean, we'll see. We'll find out from him whether or not he's satisfied with this solution. But so what we're going to do is we're going to start off. We got this little graphic here, and we're just going to kind of talk about the serial port. All right. So when you think of the serial port, think of like the USB. You've got your USB hooked up to your computer, right? And information 1 byte at a time can flow from your Arduino down that serial port and right onto the computer. And also information can flow from the computer right down back into the Arduino. And it's really awesome. I mean, that's really cool. You can communicate back and forth. So in order to kind of make that communication happen and to make it nice and in sync, you've got to do a couple things. So, and this is like kind of a best practice because you can do it a little sloppier than this, but this is one good way to do it. So you do what's called a handshake. All right. So the first thing we do is we establish an initial contact. So basically, we're going to have our Arduino. He's going to he's going to basically call the computer and he's going to say, "Hey, I'm ready, man." So he sends an initial contact, and in this case we're going to send just the character A, and we're going to send it via the serial port. All right, and we're going to say, "Hey computer, I'm ready. Are you ready?" All right, so that's initial contact. And then what the computer's going to say once it receives that A, because the software on the computer side is waiting for the A, it's going to say, "Yep." It's going to send something back. "I'm ready, man. Bring it." So now what happens? So this is where we kind of get into the question at hand. We've got 3 sensors out here, right? 3 sensors. In his case, they're strain gauges. We're going to just use 1 button, 2 potentiometers as our example. And he's got it's collecting all this cool data out here, and he wants to get this information over yonder. So how do we do that? How do we keep those 3 samples together and then get them over to the computer? So here's one way of doing it. So, and again, yeah, I think it bears this question might bear talking about. Why not do the computation here and then send it over? Well, because your Arduino is kind of like a Minnie Mouse when it comes to computation. So you'd rather have those numbers get crunched on your computer for sure. Okay, so enough about that. All right, so what we're going to do is we've established our initial contact. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sample these one at a time. So here's sample 1, sample 2, and sample 3. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to send each one into the serial port 1 at a time. And they're going to go across the serial port and they're going to go into the computer. And now on the computer side, what we're going to do is we're going to create an array. And hopefully you know what an array is. If you don't, no big deal. There's plenty of I've got other videos on arrays, but it would help to understand what an array is to understand this concept here. So we're gonna on the program side on your computer, we're gonna create an array, and we're gonna store information in this array 1 at a time. So we're gonna say, hey, here's that first piece of data. Here's that second piece of data. Here's that third piece of data. And then it's gonna say, hey, once I've received 3 pieces of data, then perform a computation, right? A plus B plus C or whatever, or A plus C plus B. Perform that computation. So now we've gotten those 3 sensor values. We send them over. This collects them. It waits for its array to be full, right? It's a 3-element array, and then it performs the computation. So everybody's happy, right? Well, mostly. So then what the computer's going to do, it's going to clear the serial port. So it's going to just get rid of all the stuff that was in that serial port. And then it's going to send a little message over to the Arduino. It's going to say, hey man, I just got all your samples. Thank you. I computed them, and now the serial port's empty. I'm ready for some more. Bring it. And then the Arduino is going to be waiting. It's going to be waiting for that acknowledgement that the program received the information, it's happy, and now what it's going to do is it's going to sample again. So it's going to 1, 2, 3, take it 3 samples, and it's going to send them back over the serial port. And the whole process is going to repeat over and over and over again. Basically, we sample. This is going to happen really quick. You know, we're talking on the scale of milliseconds, if not microseconds. We're sampling, we're sending, we compute, we clear the port, we ask for some more, the Arduino samples, sends, compute, ask for more, sample, send, compute, ask for more. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the Arduino program so we can take a look at how this is going to get pulled off. And let me know, on the computer side, we're going to use a program called processing. Now, it's really not a computational program. It's more of a graphic art kind of program. It helps you visualize things on your computer. You draw programs that make pictures. But for the most part, the basis on the Arduino side stays the same. So, he might be using Octave or MATLAB or something like that to solve this problem. The Arduino side is pretty much going to be the same regardless of what program runs on your computer to grab information from the serial port. Okay, well, man, that was a long, stinking explanation. Let's go ahead and jump into the code. All right, so here we are in Arduino. We're going to go up to File, Examples, Communication, Serial Call Response. And this is what I love about Arduino. There's so many good examples already built in. You don't even need to look on the internet. It's just like right in the integrated development environment are all these good examples. And I mean, this example is so good. I mean, you hardly have to do anything to really probably make it work for this specific project. We'll just note up top, it kind of talks about what this program is going to do, and we've talked about that already. We can thank Greg and Scott for making improvements on this program. It talks about the circuit, and so what we're going to do is we've got 2 potentiometers. They're attached to A0 and A1, and then we've got a push button attached to digital pin 2. This was created by Tom. Thank you, Tom. And they modified it back in 2012. Tom and Scott did, and I think they did that for the to adjust for the Leonardo, because there's some Leonardo specific code in here. But just to be clear, you don't need an Arduino Leonardo to do this. It'll work on any of the Arduinos. Okay, and then check out this tutorial. It's for this specific example on the Arduino website. It's really good. I would definitely recommend it. So let's jump into this first piece of code. So what's at the top of the sketch? Well, at the top of the sketch, we declare and initialize variables. So we've got our 3 sensors. We just talked about, hey, we're gonna have 2 potentiometers and 1 button. So we're gonna, hey, let's declare these, set them equal to 0, and then we've got a variable here, and what this variable is going to do is it's going to store that 1 byte that comes from the computer. That's going to be the byte that says, hey, I'm ready for more information. That's what this in byte is going to store, and it's an integer. Okay, so those are the variables. Let's move down into setup. So the first thing we do is start serial communications. Nothing big there, just 9600 baud rate. And then this piece of code right here, we're not going to talk about it too much. It's specific for the Leonardo, but again, it's just for setting up serial communications with your computer. And down here, this we set the mode of a pin. So we're setting digital pin 2 as an input. Now you might recall that actually all of the pins on your Arduino are set default as inputs. So you might be wondering, well, why do they explicitly set this digital pin as an input and not, say, the analog ones? Well, that's a good question. That's just preference. That's it. That's all I can think of. So let's move on here. We've got this next line of code. It says establish contact, and then it's got these parentheses. So this is a user-defined function. and he's defined it at the end of this program. So what it's going to do is it says it sends a byte to establish contact until the receiver responds. So remember we said the Arduino is going to send information over to the computer. It's going to say, hey man, are you ready for this? This is the first time it goes off. And that's why it only has to happen once, and that's why it's in setup. So let's go ahead, let's take a quick look at this user-defined function. It's at the bottom of the sketch. Again, user-defined functions are going to be defined after the loop. Okay, so here it is, right here. Here's our user-defined function, and let's take a look at what's inside here. So there's a while statement. So here's the while statement, and so while this condition is met in here, this code will get executed. So what is the condition? Well, it says serial.available less than or equal to 0. So the available function from the serial library, what that's going to do is it is going to return the number of bytes at the serial port. So basically, if there's nothing at the serial port, then this program is going to start sending an A, the character A. It's going to print that to the serial port, and then it's going to delay 300 milliseconds. If something is at the serial port, then this is not going to happen. So again, this is first contact. So this is the Arduino. If the computer side has done nothing, the Arduino just starts screaming A. It's waiting for that other program to say, oh, okay, I'm ready. And again, it's only going to happen once in our program when we run it, because once we've established communication, then we'll see the handshake happens just a little differently. But for the first time, this is going to make that happen. Okay, so again, the condition is anything at the serial port, because this is saying less than or equal to 0. So hey, if nothing is at the serial port, then we need to establish first contact. Okay, I beat that into the ground. So we established first contact. We are now done with setup. So now we're ready. Now we're ready to start sampling data and sending it over to the serial port. So here we are at void loop. We start with an if statement, and it says serial.available greater than 0. So again, here's this available function from the serial library. It's saying, is any information over at the serial port? And then it's going to read that value into in byte. And this is now this, you might be wondering, well, hey, why are we dealing with this incoming byte anymore? Didn't we already just take care of that? Well, the deal is we have to continually check for bytes at the serial port, because remember, what we're doing is we're waiting for the response from the computer side, in our case processing, to say, hey, now I'm ready for the next byte. So that's what this is for. All right, so we're going to store that information in byte. So we're going to read the serial port, we're going to store it in byte. Now what are we going to do? Well, now all we do is just some really straightforward stuff. We just read the sensor values. Okay, so first sensor is equal to analog read at pin A0. Now I want you to just ignore this divided by 4 for a second and just think about this part. You've seen this about 100 times. We're reading information from the analog pin A0, and we're reading it into first sensor. Now, if you recall, analog reads are going to return a value between 0 and 1024. And all this divide by 4 is doing is it's doing a quick reduction of that value. So what we want to do is we want to return a value between 0 and 255. So that's how we do it. So if you take 1024, so if the max value is 1024, you divide it by 4, you're going to get 255. And when we look at the processing side, that'll make a little more sense. And then we do it again. Here's the second sensor. Read the value, divide it by 4, and you notice there's just a 1 there. Well, throw in an A. So that A1 is going to make for an explicit, it more explicitly says, hey, look at analog 1. Alright, and then we divide it by 4 again for the same reason. And then the third sensor, and this is just a little peculiar. I will say this is a little peculiar, but it works great. Alright, now in Gukla Krishna's case, he's going to have another analog pin here. But here we've got a digital pin. And so so what we're doing is we're mapping some information. So if you've looked at the previous tutorials, you understand the map function. But what we're doing is we're taking whatever digital read to returns. All right, so we know digital read, if we've got a button hooked up to it, it's if we're pressing the button, we're going to get a 1, and if we're not pressing the button, we're going to get a 0. All right, so the range, these first two numbers, this range is 0 and 1, and then the mapped output, though, is going to be 0 and 255. All right, so basically what we're doing is we're making this return either 0 or 255 instead of 0 or 1. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You got to be familiar. If you've seen some of the previous tutorials, that will make sense. But What I'm going to do though is I'm going to change this to about 120 because you'll see on the other end 120 is a little better. So we're going to either send, if we're not pressing the button, we're going to send 120. If we are pressing the button, we're going to send 255. And basically these values equate to different colors on processing. Okay, and then what do we do? Well, we're going to use the write function. We're going to write to the serial port the first sensor value. Then we're going to write to the serial port the second sensor value. Then we're going to write to the serial port the third sensor value. And that's it. Okay, so we've done that. We've written all these values to the serial port. They're walking over. So now where do they go? Okay, well, they're going to go to whatever that program is on the other side. In our case, processing. Well, let's take a look at the processing code, okay? And handily, they've stuck it right at the bottom of this sketch. Is that awesome or what? So all I'm going to do is copy all of this. This is processing code. This is not Arduino code. This is basically Java. All right, so it's a different language. So we're not going to get too in-depth into this. You've basically seen all you need to see on the Arduino side. But let's go ahead and open processing, and we'll paste all this code in here. Okay, so now we're processing side, and I'm not going to go too in depth on the processing code, but let's just kind of walk through some of the highlighted things right here. Okay, so the first thing is I want to point out, look at this. They're creating an array right here. So this array, serial in array, and it holds 3 elements. Well, those 3 elements it holds are the values that you just passed over the serial port. All right, and then we've got another one, serial count equal to 0. This is basically counting, this variable is going to count the number of bytes. And then when the number of bytes is equal to 3, it's going to reset, and it's going to let the Arduino know, hey, I just read my 3 bytes, you can send some more to me. Okay, so here, again, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but here is where we're basically setting up the program and the variables, or rather we're initializing and declaring some variables, kind of getting things set up. And then, but here's the official setup. The only thing you really got to worry about in here is setting up your serial port list. And again, if you've watched those other processing programs or programs, this will kind of make sense. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this to 5 because I know that the 5th serial port works on my computer. That's the setup. We get into void draw. There's really not much here, but this X position and this Y position, and then this FG color, all of this is going to get set from our sensor data. And that happens down here in this serial event. Okay, so this is a function they've created. It's a serial event, and what happens is when it receives information, so it's going to say, hey, if I receive A, so this is that first contact, remember that? It's going to clear the port. So now the port's clear. It's going to say, hey, first contact is now equal to true. And what it's going to do is it's going to write A to the serial port. And so this is this initial handshake, okay? So, hey, did I receive anything? Yep, I received something. Okay, clear that serial port. Now, set first contact to true. So we've established this first contact, and now I'm going to write A back. So I received an A, now I'm going to write an A back. Now let's go, I just want to jump back to this Arduino code. So remember here, back here in this loop, so here, down here in established contact, we sent the A. So processing received the A, and then it sent back another A. And when it sent back that other A, now there's something available at the serial port. So because serial available is going to return a value greater than 0. It's going to return 1 because A is at the serial port, which is 1 byte. And so now all this stuff is going to happen. All right, okay. Hope this isn't too crazy. First contact's been established. We're happy. So now if first contact is done, so again, this only happens once when that was false, but now first contact is true. First contact is true. So now next time we come through this is not going to happen, but this is going to happen, this else statement. So what do we start doing? We start writing that byte that we got into our array one at a time. We increment serial count, and then if serial count is greater than 2, so again, arrays are 0 indexed, so if there's 3 elements now saved into our array, let's go ahead and write this information, set these values right here equal to the information that came in over the serial port. Okay, and then it's going to print this information out down here, and then it's going to write another A to the serial port, and it's going to reset serial count. Okay, so this is going to say, hey Arduino, I'm ready for some more, and then this resets the count. Okay, so I know that was kind of really fast and furious through this processing code. I don't want to spend too much time on Java because I'm more, again, this side of it isn't going to help you too much. I mean, if you're going to be using Octave or some other type of program, this is kind of basically, what needs to happen, but it's going to be written in that program's code. So let's go ahead and run this code. Okay, so you can see, hey, there's that little ball there, and then when I press my button, it turns white. So I'm pressing my button, and it turns white. And now I'm going to turn one of my potentiometers. Look at that. The ball goes up and down, and the other potentiometer goes left and right. And then if I move them at the same time, get really tricky on us here. See, it can move around the screen. And if I'm really tricky, I can press the button at the same time. Okay, see that? So what's going on here? Well, the first potentiometer is the up and down. All right. Again, this is just a value being sent across the serial port. And this is analog right. So up here is 0, and you can see down at the bottom of the screen the value that's getting received over the serial port. So there's 0. Down here is 255. Okay, so up here again, this is 0. There's 255, and then here, look at this value. That's 0, and when I come all the way over right, that's 255. And then the button. Notice I'm not pressing the button. The values. I'm going to move this back in the center here. It's 120. Now when I press the button, it's 255. Okay, and this 120 and 255, those are just designating a color. So like 255 is white, 0 is black, and 120 is like somewhere in between. Okay, so I think you get the kind of idea here. So this might be one way to solve your deal. You're gonna write that information 1 byte at a time over the serial port. Again, that's gonna happen really fast. All right, we're talking on the order of microseconds. It's gonna write that data, send it over to the computer. The computer is gonna collect each of those bytes, or the processing basically, or Octave or whatever computational program you use. It's gonna keep those bytes, put them in an array, and then it's gonna display that information. Do its computation or whatever. All right, so hey, I hope that was helpful. I don't know if I really hit the dot for you or not, but that was it, man. All right, take it easy. Bye. Oh, one more thing. If you have a question, I would love for you to send it in. I'm going to try to do these on a weekly basis, so send in your question. Please make them easier than this one. My gosh, what do you think I got, like freaking all day to do this? So no, please send me your question. I would love to try to work with yours too. So thanks a ton for watching. Take it easy. Bye.